looking at what we have inside the Standard today, where we have the DCI in the big shoes there of thugs as it is, and the media. I'll leave it for you to decipher this. This is what Gado has drawn today. And also, we have Stano in the People Daily. He says that what Zico is saying, it used to be Kenya Hakuna Matata. Now it's Kenya Hakuna Matata, right? That's how it seems, with the recent also blackout that we had over the weekend. And they're now also blaming Olkaria, right? That for the last, I think, 4 good years, we've had all hitches from Olkaria that has been subjecting the country into power blackouts, right? Back to black. This is what Sano has drawn, and also Ali had shown you. Wasn't me. This is what we had from JKA, and we'll run you by that story where now the CAC is mulling over forming a committee to address and assess the state of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, Wilson Airport, and Moi airports as well. But before we head there, let's just hear from sh3bn. I'm holding court with the chair of Kenya Diaspora Alliance and also the chair of Kenya Development Corporation, and also Bill Okero, a political economist and businessman as well. sh3bn, yes. wanted to comment on the passport issue.
On the ID.
On the ID.
It seems there's an indigenous guy in government. Maybe he should be given one of those honorary degrees that are being talked about. Somebody seems to have invented or discovered, being very creative, that there are some of the salient laws in this country that have not been operationalized sufficiently, or some rates that have not been reviewed for a long time, hence leading to this craze of increasing prices abnormally, almost on everything. I'm saying that, of course, with a light touch. There is what we call the Peoples and Human Rights, the Peoples and Human Rights Charter. There are certain inalienable rights, like citizenship, that you can't take away from citizens. To ask people to pay 2,000 shillings to get a national ID, in a country where we must look at our per capita income. There are people where families have to struggle even just to raise that 2,000 in a month. If it's going to be equivalent to what you pay to get a national ID, obviously that's absurd. It gets even worse in the case of the diasporas, where we are saying one has got to pay 1 million shillings. I think previously 500,000 shillings for a child born outside. It's crazy. Even that 500,000 shillings itself was bad enough. To double it, at a time when we need more chums coming in, we need more dollars, more euros coming in. I think obviously government wants to make money and generate more money. But let's do it in a manner that there is buy-in, that's got public participation. And I know, for me, the two major focus or foci areas would be export, produce for export. Maybe this is why our neighbors, Tanzania and Uganda, are doing a little better than us. We're not producing, exporting enough. The FDI, the foreign direct investment, I think the two countries are overtaking us, while we should be the big brother, big sister in this regard. So the only way to bring in more of the inflows, and there are a couple of possible inflows that would come in. I just saw a text from Mr. Mwaura in Poland. He says he always wakes up at 4 a.m. You know, Poland is 2 hours behind us to watch this show. There are a number of people like that, and a guy who is capable of getting millions of dollars or euros into this country in investment, and there are many more. There is the Guardian City. The investors there have put in, I think, about 20 or so billion shillings in terms of investment in real estate in this country. And they have potential to do more. Can we create an environment where it's attractive to invest in this country, okay, and we produce more? And for the diasporas, who are our major foreign exchange earner, let's not disincentivize them. We should be incentivizing them. So that's why I wanted to say that I think, for me, and I think we all on this panel agree, that some of these fees that are being introduced, it would have been best, instead of putting the cart before the horse, government would have demonstrated the little we have, we are using it very well. For those, if you can use little, can be trusted with little, you can be trusted with even bigger. But now the government is overtaxing us, while even we are not seeing the benefit, the commensurate benefit of that tax that's being taken from us. I would encourage government to go a little easy on this regard and have a national conversation, because you need to carry the country. It could be well-intentioned what government is doing, but without carrying the country along, we can't succeed.
Right, and even just talking about these taxes, Bill Okero, we have the ports of Mombasa as well, that the fees there and the revenues were meant to be increased. I can see the court has actually stopped that because there was no public participation.
Yeah.
Right? You want to comment on that but briefly? Yeah.
Yeah, you see, the law is very clear. If the government wants to introduce any policy change or any administrative change that has an impact on the lives of Kenya, there must be public participation. But what has been happening is that in the same way the security minister went ahead and announced, and land minister went ahead, and there's no public participation even in the case of the port. Port has many uses, incidentally, it's not like, and it's commercial area, so it has impact on people who are clearing goods, who are importing goods, who are doing business there. So I think the sudden, introduction of changes in the cost of in the port charges would impact significantly on the cost of imports. Already, the IDF rates were increased taxes were increased by the government, and so some of the taxes had been. So the cost of import is already high. Then you introduce again more charges for the port. I think it's clear that the court said there is no public participation. You can't. And I think there was an earlier arrangement between KPA and the users that these things would be discussed. You cannot just introduce, but then the government went ahead, KPA went ahead, and this is coming at the time when the government is talking of concession in the port. You would think that, yes, let us, they clear with concessioning first. But, you cannot be concessioning and then you're also raising port charges, and so it's confusion, really, the way the government's desperation to try and get taxes or revenues or levies by whatever means. This is what drives it.
So someone also is waiting maybe to challenge that particular new move from the government on the museum levies and also the national park levies as well. Yeah, so that is bound also to affect our tourism.
All will go to court.
All will go to courts.
Yes. Even marriages,
even marriage certificates as well.
No, I think this is absurd, to say the least. Even for those of us who are ordinarily considered be government friendly, I think there needs to be a rethink on this matter. But more importantly, let's put the facts on the table. Kenyans would understand. We got an empty coffer. Fine. What is it that we are doing so that even this little that we have is most effectively utilized? We still see a bit of waste in government. Maybe not as much as we saw in the previous regime, but there can be an improvement still.
Right, so the fact that they're hanging on IMF, that you have to meet the IMF conditions, as we've just seen that the bipartisan talks as well.
The whole of this thing is being driven.
IMF driven, even
driven by IMF and World Bank. You see the story today in the papers.
Well, okay.
It's all driven by that. We are back to where we were in the 80s, at the time of Moi, when IMF was determining who sits where in government office. Literally, the same thing is now happening. You're given, a list of everything that you need to do. It's crazy.
Bunyasisako, even planting trees, it seems to be an initiative of IMF.
Well, maybe that
now we have to go on a public holiday because we have to meet IMF conditions.
To go on a holiday, yes. But my comment on this is, personally, and having spent a lot of my life with the Bretton Woods institutions, there's something that always makes me uncomfortable, which is that now Kenya is at a point in which they should determine policy by the way their expertise drives them in their analytics. But as it is, for example, what should be the ideal exchange rate for the shilling? In Economics 101, it should be that which clears the market, as they say. But that exchange rate may be 400, maybe 300, or some large number. Is that what, do you go there because you think it's going to be market clear? You don't. You manage the transition from where you are to where you want to go. Countries like India have done that. They have, even the Japanese for a long time, you couldn't touch anything to do with their agriculture because that's where they produce their rice. That was really a sacred area. Japan has been going through a lot of reforms since the Second World War. India, IMF does not have programs with India, except some technical assistance programs on the margin, because they have a big segment that they want to manage the transition of, given the status of development, given the levels of poverty and difficulties in the poverty and distribution around the country. We just can't listen to conservative economics from the IMF economists. The governor is a very good friend of mine, and I have many friends there. The secretary to the IMF is from Mombasa, is a Kenyan. So we have very many people, our own people in there too, but I'm talking about the corporate ethos of those institutions. We must be able to say, oh yes, in the ideal sense, we would be there, but who is living the ideal life? Not the big countries we know, no, nobody at all. How do we get from where we are, where there is reality, to where we want to go? You want to raise revenue to a certain point. I know we are stuck a bit with a huge debt burden, but we must be doing something there to show that we are shaving off our appetite for increased debt by cutting waste, by being intolerant. And I like what the president did recently in curtailing foreign travel costs, and I can tell you it's biting institutions and so on. That needs to go even further than that. I think they should get into ministries and find out, for example, like, how much of what we spend on these institutions is too much. So that there's that element. Guzzlers, for example, gas guzzlers in vehicles. There's a time, I think it was during Uhuru's early reign, when vehicles were sort of packed away, that they're not going to use them. Then they came back to the market, and then now chase cars. When a Tanzanian visits Kenya and finds that the most expensive models of Mercedes-Benz are chase cars for Kenyan ministers, I think they just get shocked. I don't think we should be there. I remember when I was a student, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta had a Mercedes, I don't know if it was 500 or 600, this big one.
Right.
The Tanzanian president was driving a Saloon 404 Peugeot. That's how Nyerere got around.
The Simba.
Yeah.
The Simba Peugeot.
Something like that. So I think that we must find ways in which we demonstrate the austerity we are saying we want to do by what. I really think that managing that, making people see the austerity program with actual changes, managing the onboarding, I think is a popular word, of taxes in the economy is very important. The sequencing of taxes is very important. And being clear about how you are using those taxes and how you're using differently. And I want to go back to Bilo's comment. National government can't tax all it can tax. And then there is a pushback, you now tell the counties also do something. I think that's mischievous in a way. There must be a way in which the national taxation policy or revenues offset some of the need for local governments to do it, but they may not have areas they can do so without duplicating and just making life more difficult for the citizens. If every county can find a tax that provides a direct service back to the people different from what the general national tax does, so be it, that'd be good. But certainly let us get out of charges and levies on IDs, things that you ought to get for free. And then you say, if you don't get an ID, then your child can't get to school. Or then you can't do this, then you can't do that. You can't receive your old age pension, which is 2,000 shillings a month. And now you're going to take one whole month just to get an ID. You'll get another whole, I don't know how much death taxes are going to be. You won't get a death certificate and birth certificate. Yeah. You can't do that. They'll take 6 months of that particular allowance.
And so they will roll out the IDs, and then we are going to also push aside the IDs, have the Maisha card, and then we're going to be charging also Maisha cards as well.
Yes.
Maybe to be fair to government on the tree planting, that everything seems to come from IMF. I think tree planting and targeting to plant 15 billion trees is a very noble idea. While in France 2-3 weeks ago, I was glad to see CS Kipchumba in Mombasa, the mangrove plant. I think it's called Mikoko in Swahili, if I'm not mistaken. I found that such a big thing between France and Kenya. Maybe we are all aware that actually Kenya and France are driving at a global level matters of climate change and carbon credits. We're not only making the environment friendlier, but there's also money to be made from carbon credits. So if we succeed to grow those plants, we can go a long way. But this axiom that we need to tax more on everything, for me, is a no-go area.
Right, but still, the question is, does it have to take the hand of the IMF for us to be prompted to plant these trees?
No.
Because
of course, I'll comment on that, but let me, the thing is, I keep repeating in every opportunity I get, money does not grow on trees. Even individuals and businesses have to struggle to get. So when you wake up and then, like this morning, I forgot the national, the security guards.
Yes.
You now have to pay them a minimum of 30. The government is enacting that into a law. You've seen it, 30,000 shillings. I mean, fine, but there are 2 million security guards working in your homes and everywhere. You know, in businesses, suddenly, you know, you say minimum. If you don't give them 30,000, you pay 2 million shillings fine. I mean, you don't. Everything needs to be transitioned to look at the situation of the economy.
Sure.
But you know, that one day, it cost the economy 7 billion. That public holiday on Monday.
7 billion.
Yeah, simple.
People don't,
you know, it's top of the GDP, and one day you miss out, it's costing that. And it's planting. You could plant, and I saw somebody, an ordinary Kenyan was being interviewed, mama, and she says, "Did we have to have this? We can plant trees every day. Why do you need a holiday?" But the reason was very clear. The government had applied for a facility, for a climate fund facility through IMF, and IMF so was coming to town, and they wanted to impress the IMF. That, you know, you guys, we actually have a day when we are planting trees, a national holiday.
So it was just a posturing.
So, I mean,
it was pure posturing from government to impress IMF. We lose 7 billion shillings.
Yeah, it's misplaced.
Yeah, let me add also, I don't think that the holiday was really necessarily for the tree planting. I think tree planting focus and even a day for it, I think is needed, is good, but I don't think you need a public holiday for it. And then the second thing is, I get depressed virtually when we are doing something like the program on mangroves, that Kenya has to get a foreign power to come and a foreign government to come and assist them, do things they can do with their own resources. That's where we go wrong. And we escalate this to a point now where that inflow is either conditional upon a reciprocal favor, or at some point it's going to be an aid, you know, or a loan or something. There are many things we can do on our own. We can plant the 15 billion trees simply by mobilizing our populations. Over time, we will get there. But I do not think we need a foreign government to help you run a knowledge hole to
One
start
Sunday every month you can have tree planting.
So this was a facility on climate change that IMF actually steamrolling, and I think this particular agreement was
climate finance.
The climate finance was
I want also Shem to also comment on this matter. You know, you saw it. I think I did send to you or something. The way some arrangement with one of the Gulf countries regarding the carbon credits, our entire, not just the forest cover, but the entire land in Kenya is literally mortgaged for carbon credits to some companies in the Gulf countries. You saw that?
No, that's true, Debal.
Yeah.
Until
let's just get it clear. Let's get so it is mortgaged. What does that mean? What does it mean?
Maybe
that they will claim carbon credit for all the plants and vegetables and forest cover, everything in this country. A company in a country, was given that right to do that. It's been on the news. It's been on the international news.
And there was no public participation.
Maybe I can.
But this is very serious because it befits all this effort for us to actually on Monday to go and plant trees. Yet all these carbon credits that will come will go to a private farm in the Gulf.
Debal, I could try to break it down. Rwanda, for example, when I was there, every last Saturday of the month would have a cleaning, city cleaning, and town cleaning, and plant growing session. So I think Omuganga is what it was called, or a name like that. So Kenya, of course, could also have its own days to plant trees. But in terms of what Bilo is saying about mortgaging our trees, until about 6 months ago, it turned out that there were 200 companies registered making money out of carbon credit in Kenya. The sad thing is all of them were foreign, 200 of them, until about 6 months ago when at least Kenya Diaspora Alliance, our board members did register one that's now Kenyan. Obviously, and I also remember coming across a friend of mine telling me his mom in Meru is paid every month 3,000 or 6,000 shillings for their trees. There are people, indeed, true, that are making money out of these trees. We don't even know because it's invisible, we don't see. In a neighboring country, a large country, I think it said last year, some people earned $15 million from carbon credit from their forests. And of that, only 5% went to that country, meaning 95% of that money went outside. Why am I saying this, Debal? For me, I would not have a major problem with 7 billion being lost to have a holiday. If at the end of the day we're going to make 10 times out of growing trees, which we can if we manage to plant the 15 billion. However, where I would have a problem is, you know, when it just comes out, bang, next week or on Monday we are having a holiday. You know, there's no, in my view, no prior sufficient planning. It would have been nice if we say, like, even 3 months down the line, people pray. That's Kenya diaspora. We're meant to be planting about 1% of those trees. But you know, how do we just wake up and tell people, look, there's this program on Monday? How do we even mobilize people resources? And this is where, in my view, the aspect of public participation and carrying the public with you is so important. I remember when Kenya was working on Vision 2030. Rwanda was working on Vision 2020. The interesting thing was that almost every Rwandese was so engaged. In fact, to the extent that I remember while traveling in a matatu in Kigali, a foreigner did ask, what's this Vision 2030 everybody is talking about? And somebody seated next to me told them, you don't know Vision 2030? Vision 2020? It's like you're a stranger in Jerusalem, because that was ingrained in the mind of the people because there was public participation. So yes, my advice to the administration, and initially I thought the administration was borrowing a bit from Kigali, which I think is the right way to go. As Kigali, we did borrow then quite a bit from Singapore and Malaysia, and I think those are action roadmaps that deliver results. And I wish we could stay that way, cutting down on expenses.
Thank you.
Over expenditure on transport for the CSS, the PSS. I think it needs to start by showing. I remember, for example, in Rwanda, and as it has changed, even ministers don't travel first class. In fact, as CEOs, I was a CEO of a strategic state corporation, Rwanda IT authority at the time, we wouldn't travel even business. As CEOs, we were traveling economy class. So it needs to come, a signal needs to be sent in government. I thought we started in the right way. We need to keep it until the economy is back on its feet.
Shemi, we've been talking about critical infrastructure, because where the world is headed in this epoch of time, it seems that even carbon tradings will become, you know, a huge avenue of generating income for countries. And when we talk about even a debt to nature swap, that is way that we can think. Now that we're seeing the shilling is actually on a free fall, we will look into that, because the government had earlier said that we left it, you know, cost correct itself in the market. But now we can see they're coming again with other interventions. So also this double speak. But I wanted just to latch on this question, because when we have, as it is here, that Kenya is conceding millions of hectares to UAE farm in the latest carbon offset deal, and it seems, and this is an eye-popping figure. It says here, Dubai-based firm Blue Carbon has signed a framework of collaboration (FOC) with Kenya, or Kenya State Department of Environment and Climate Change, that will concede millions of hectares of its territory for the production of carbon credits. The credits will be generated supposedly from restoring and protecting the land, and the company will then sell this to major polluters to offset their emissions. This follows a slew of similar contracts with Liberia, Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, which consider 7.5 million hectares, a fifth of its land mass, to the company. Cumulatively, the deals concedes near blanket control over the total of 24.5 million hectares, encompassing land inhabited and used by local communities. This is something that we need to interrogate. How then do we? Where were we? This is public land. This acreage
is about 8% of our entire land in Kenya.
About
8% of our entire,
including where people are living, your farms, everything is being.
It's been getting
credit.
And you're not aware.
The bulk, for me, I would really have no problem if mortgaging is the term we want to use. You know, as long as it's done transparently, and as long as we get value for money because these trees are there, we're not being paid for them now. Yet there are people who are being paid for them without even us knowing.
And who are these people who are being paid?
Well, in Kenya, I mentioned there are 200 registered companies doing carbon trading. I think for me, Dibala, as you call it, critical infrastructure, we need to see the opportunity. When Kenya Kwanza administration said we want to plant 5 billion, 15 billion,
15 billion, yes.
I thought that melts the coffee. Just let's make sure it's done properly, that the country gets value, equivalent value, the desired value that we need from people mortgaging it. But growing trees is good for our own environment, for our own health. But in addition, because it's lined also with primary health care, that is preventive rather than curative. But above all else, can we get the experts to do the numbers? And this is where I wanted to say data comes in, data currency. You know, when even I see farmers talk about maize price and so on, I'm asking how much artificial intelligence have we used to gauge?
But before we even go to the data, can we interrogate how we got here first? Because, you know, when we get all this news, we are here to actually put government in check. Sure. And understand how this negotiation happened, where and now when. Right. Before we go to the meat of it on how exceeding, we don't disagree that it's beneficial. Sure. But when we have acreage of land like this being done, and then we actually reading it in international publications,
you don't hear about it.
We have no sorting idea that it was done.
Right.
And then we come later, oh, we're in a contractual agreement, oh, we cannot reveal this contract because of a non-disclosure clauses here that we have. I mean, this is what now Kenyans really don't like. I think we want to be a transparent country.
And I think last year I raised it here. Last year about the KWS areas, all those national parks being used for this carbon trading, and by private individuals. I mentioned it. I raised it in this same forum. You see, so when you now look at what happened in the climate conference recently, and the focus on making Nairobi a carbon credit capital, and the stock exchange for carbon credit and all that, and then the focus on planting of the trees, and so you can see there is people who are really thinking ahead on this thing. But the thing is what Shema said. One, there's no transparency around it. Two, is there someone else getting the money, or did we getting the money? Sure. I can tell you, like in the case of those national parks, I tried to find out. Because a friend of mine who went down and told me, you are not aware, all those trees everywhere in these national parks, there are people who are claiming carbon credit every day. So now you see 1/10 of nearly the country, a company just takes the carbon credit and they're getting paid. You look at the figures, it's billions of dollars.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that transparency and that value for money, so I think there's something that people in government do, which sometimes in a country where there's trust deficit, integrity is an issue.
Sure.
These things are not a very good thing. And all these things happen behind the scenes. And
there's a skunk here that is bound to be reeking very soon.
Debal, if I may just add something, that I think the biggest issue around that is the issue of full disclosure, transparency, participation, and so on. It may not be in the actual architecture of the carbon credit collection and payments, because there's probably a huge state segment that benefits from this, and I can't say that it is improper until we learn, but there's a risk there that if it's not transparent, if you can't see it, you can't measure it. So I think that's something we must look at carefully. But we have done very well relative to many countries by, say, allowing so much of our territory to be in the national parks and wildlife reserves and so on and so forth. Just the kinds of things that would attract some carbon credits under the new arrangements. Now, how now that is being drawn into, how that's being utilized needs to be explained quite clearly. You remember in Narok at one time, it was not a carbon credit, but there was a revenue collection in the park. And the county, when we became county, they said, no, that this money is not even getting all into the treasury. This has been contracted to someone to manage this collection, and here they demonstrated there were huge losses, wastage, siphoning of revenue that could be either county or national, or going to third parties. And later, county felt that they should be getting a lot more. I think they did some adjustment. So public participation, Kenya is so informed. I'm sure that we are in a position to get good analysts who would put this into question. And I don't think that Parliament should just be laughing their way into re-election without tackling this issue. When the SGR agreements came up, Parliament is completely sidelined, and they didn't make enough noise on it. Somebody said in passing, so how could they have even analyzed them, because the primary documents were in Mandarin, and they didn't seek to get that translated. That's on a light note. That is true, though. But I really think that Parliament should save us by insisting that these kinds of arrangements first be brought before them. There ought to be public participation, not with the guys who have done it, but with somebody who is informed with the national interest, to explain what it is we are seeking to know. I think it's very important, even if it's beneficial, but you need to know what it is.
Talking of Mandarin, but the bulb.
No, before we come to show, I wanted just to ask Bunyasi Sako, because now if we are gravitating towards what it is right now with the carbon tradings, and we can see other jurisdictions actually mulling over, debts to nature swap. We have a huge debt here. How can we also leverage on our assets, which we of the forestry that we do have here in the country, the flora, yes, to actually manage this debt? Is this something that the government is considering?
That's why I think that
so that now, instead of having these deals with the UAE firm, that will be a primary concern, because we want to actually make sure that at least the books looks good as far as debt is concerned. Look at the shilling right now, 3 billion shillings daily. We've seen now that there's a budgetary allocation of around how many billions? Is it 200 billion shillings to try and actually catch up with the debt because of the runaway or the weakening of the shilling?
I think
can we consider that?
Yes. I think you're raising important issues on these, very important issues. One, on the issues of debt swap for nature, as you would say, I think it's really important that we understand how these arrangements, including these with the UAE farms, how much of it benefits Treasury. And the extent that there is any inflow that goes to Treasury, it will be an element of offsetting part of that debt and so on. That's why we need to understand that clearly and be sure that even if the principle sounds right, that the actual sharing is also right. That we also need to look at very, very closely. I think we shouldn't trust but verify. It's very important. There is a trust deficit with the government, has been on for some time, for good reason and so on. And you can see the Kenya Kwanza regime did dwell on that quite a bit, gave a bit of oomph, as you say, at the beginning. And now that they're settling in the second year, they have to work on reducing that trust deficit. We also have come out to trust public participation so much that's enshrined in our constitution. And as you have seen, courts have made they have made landmark decisions against initiatives that did not have public participation. It's not something that is a favor. It's something that needs and must be done, and must be done properly. The problem we have is that even when we have a specific issue in this country, for example, if there was concern about the nature of the public carbon credit earnings that are accruing to the Emirati farm or UAE farm, in a short while we shall be discussing about the generality of carbon credits and so on. Let's just focus on this arrangement, and then let us use those facts that we arrive at to draw broad conclusions. Start with the known and then get into the unknown. If you start people with the unknown, we shall be groping around for a long time.
Right.
Yes. Actually, for me, I wouldn't be so much worried about the 8% of our land mass being mortgaged if we got value for it. Why do I say this? We have 2/3, which is about 67 of our massland, which is largely arid and semi-arid.
Sand.
What is it that we can do to bring it back to life? And there are ways of doing it. And talking of the Gulf, Israel and Middle East and so on, those guys are in deserts. But we find at times, I get amazed when we eat fruits and oranges from Israel, for example. What is it that we can do? And it's not that we don't have the knowledge and the skill to get this done. I was talking to a senior officer from the National Drought Management Authority, and was telling us they've done some crunching of numbers. If Kenya just spent between 20 to 30 billion in the next 5 to 10 years to turn around northeastern region, the northern frontiers, into arable land, within like 20 years would make about 5 times of the money we invest there. So in my view, the BAL, maybe the mortgaging part of the land to the Gulf, the Emiratis, is not bad if we get value. But even more importantly, given the knowledge and skill they already have, why don't we even agree with them that this land mass that's currently not fully utilized, how do we bring it back to life? I thought that's part of what LAPSET project, Lamu through to Sudan, to South Sudan was meant, and Nepal was meant to do, to bring that part of our region, which is a sleeping giant. It's got resources both underground and overground, particularly if we can develop it. So for me, as long as it's done as we agree, transparently, we get value for money, there's public participation, it is the way to go. But more importantly, let's negotiate with them that the areas, the semi-arid, which currently is not utilized, is brought to life.
Right. So, Bilo, if we have now the trees, the acreage, the coverage that we do have, and trees should be classified directly as critical infrastructure, because moving forward, when you're talking about sustainability, the triple P bottom economy, or the triple T, the triple P, the people, the planet, and the profit as well, that will be a pivotal thing to look after. But have we taken stock of how many trees we have in this country? If we just, from every county, that every tree, it's a resource. It's now an asset that should be considered, and should be actually in the books as an asset considered, so that now the biggest thing that we are lacking, and you've mentioned even it before, is auditing of this sustainable, auditing of the carbon trading.
I think in the last climate, when the climate conference was held, what came out very clear is that Kenya is one of the favorite destinations for carbon credits in the world. What the government said is that they had this country produces about 70 million cubic meters of carbon dioxide, I think, annually. Which is based on those trees, 70 million.
70 million.
It's huge. It's huge. And in just a few months ago, they traded. Remember, the Saudi farms bought 2 million metric tons of carbon credits here. They were paying about $6 per ton.
$6 per ton?
Yes. Now, don't ask me, is it government, is it private company? I don't know how that is done. But
those are the things that...
This is a national resource that is being sold. But who sells it? Is it a private company? I have no idea. But what I know is that this trees is, for the purpose of this carbon credit, is measured in terms of how much emissions of carbon dioxide that they generate. This is what the credit that they sell. And Kenya is huge, because they count all the trees, they look at all the output. And so it's based on the trees and all that, and the plants and everything in the country. And so I think it's a very important thing that we need. There has been a bit of a quarrel in the past between the Minister of Environment and Treasury and NEMA and all these government institutions who should be in charge of all these things. Even when resources are available for climate finance, and what is always a quarrel.
This docket actually should be,
and so we have not really utilized the potential. For example, the MAO alone, the amount of money you can get for the carbon credits can finance our entire forest and environment ministry, plus all our national parks. I'm telling you, MAO alone. I remember when we were at COP27 in Marrakesh, we looked at that. And we have so many forests like that. So the potential is there. The question is whether we are using these things for the national good, or fellows are taking advantage. You see, that's our challenge.
That is where I wanted to go. Are people taking advantage? Because carbon trading seems to be so esoteric, and it goes way beyond the knowledge of many Kenyans, that you've not even taken, maybe even as media, time to try and break it down on how it can be exceedingly beneficial to the common mwananchi. And so, using this sort of ignorance, also people are now trading and having some underhandings right now
under the law
to benefit themselves.
And that Climate Act, which was passed a couple of years ago, you remember?
Yes.
In Parliament, it's very clear that at least, I think, 40% of the proceeds of such climate proceedings from carbon credit or climate finance, whatever, must go to the local communities for that. That is very clear in the law.
It is very clear in the law. 40%.
In the Act, it is very clear. 40% must go to the...
I had a friend in the UK who lived somewhere in the southwest in Wales, and he was a small-scale farmer. They decided that instead of using their land for crop fully or for livestock, they would leave some of it to natural waste, to nature. And those lands that you left, there were credits from European Union that were being paid. That was what that the UK then was had just. And it was more valuable to leave land idle than to cultivate it in many parts.
Yeah.
So that, in a sense, preceded these discussions on climate financing and so on. But there were advantages in that. But you see, the benefits were accruing directly to owners. And if they were communal, like they are grazing lands, the case of my friend, were communal, the community actually got that money in cash, and then they invested it as they agreed to do globally. I mean, collectively. So we can't be in a country like this where we have all this carbon trading with other nations and so on, who actually, we're repeating this a bit, who actually receives the money, how much is it received, and so on. How does the community become part of it? I have trees, for example. I've spent a lot of money growing them and looking after them, and now not cutting them. That's a cost also, just not cut them.
The incentive was to sell to Kenya Power?
Yes, intending to sell to Kenya Power, you know.
But now in this Canada, there's another trend now that is happening, the carbon trading.
Eucalyptus grandi that we did with great enthusiasm 15 years ago. And that's, you don't get to know about this, even someone who can read and write like myself. You discover it only in the papers. It's just not good enough.
News article.
The truth is...
Let's hear from, I'll come to you. You wanted to say?
On that news article, it says part of that 24 million hectares, which is 45,000 square kilometers, they said it's all the conservancies in the northern rangelands. They're all covered in this blue carbon deal. So the question is, will the proceeds go to those places, as Shem said? Does it go to those people to turn those areas into something else? That's, this is the challenges we have.
Shem, you wanted to say something?
The bulk for me, it all boils down to data. Why do I say so? It's at a primary level, the bulk. Having trees is in its own, even if you're not being paid for it, it's a good thing. Because the environment is fresh and so on. So assuming there was even no carbon credit payment being made, it's a good thing to do. Of course, the UN has set like the standard of having 10% of forest cover. And in the case of Kenya, it varies. My county, Homa Bay, which is one of the better ones in the Nyanza region, it's about 3%. In a place like Nyeri, I think it's about 24%. If we moved from the 3 or 4% where we are at the moment to 10%, would go a long way in terms of what we can make, because the trees are there, they're not being taken away from you. So it's like you get double benefit from it. Somebody is paying you to do it right. But having the data that's right on it is important. And part of it has got to do also with I think the aspect of the arid and semi-arid where we are not doing enough. We probably still need to do something. Let's have the experts.
Right.
Talking of UK, one of the leading...
I agree with you, Shem, but that is for the future. You know, now we need to actually look and interrogate the things that are actually happening here. Because even as you say, that is all, either way, we benefit from fresh air, we benefit from, of course, now the benefits of trees, rainfall, and all good weather. But at the same time, there are many farmers who needs to actually benefit from what is happening currently. Today. We're talking about poverty and uplifting people who have no sorting idea on what to do with the trees. And they have huge acreage where they've planted these trees. As you mentioned, 40% should be going to the local people. But right now, there are people who are way smarter and they've gone ahead, they've seen the opportunity. Before we are fully aware, they've actually really made a big bang out of this.
Taken the whole
thing and run away with it. So before you even talk about data, so what I'm saying, before you even talk about data and arid, there's something which is happening before, you know, people are awake that, something is being done. That's why I wanted to ask this question before we take a short break. Then how is the Auditor General's docket also auditing the carbon credits? Have we also given that particular job description to the Auditor General that we should be auditing? And even audits, we have audit experts in all these counties, right, who are auditing our critical assets that we take to be the forests and the trees and even we do a census, so to speak.
Yes, of our trees.
Of our trees, so that we know we can actually accrue this much in terms of carbon trading from every single tree that is planted here in the country. Bilo?
No, no. Auditor General, the mandate he has in the Public Audit Act is very clear. He audits institutions that custody to government assets and resources, but not a national assets in the sense that, you know, all the trees and all the air we have, they have to audit. No, they don't do that. So I think if a matter, for example, there's a contractual relationship between a government institution and a foreign entity regarding, you know, this kind of carbon credit deal, he would audit it when he's doing the normal financial audits. He would audit it. But I don't think this particular one, for example, the fluke carbon, is something that would come to the, because if it is, it depends on how it is done, at what level. Most of these things are usually done either at treasury level, most likely at treasury level.
Right.
So if it is, and there's a contractual arrangement officially with the government, then he would be permitted and he will be able to look at it.
So what is the sole function of the National Climate Secretariat? Because I think under the new Climate Act as well, we should set up a National Climate Secretariat. Who is heading this National Climate Secretariat? I know the president previously, Uhuru Kenyatta, was the chair, so to speak, if I may remember my facts right, of the National Climate Secretariat. So what is the sole function of a National Climate Secretariat? And these issues that we're talking about, how are they being handled by the National Climate Secretariat? Maybe this is way beyond...
well, the BAL, in the upcoming diaspora conference, one of the topics we're going to discuss is carbon credit. And one of the directors who is specializing in the carbon credit is saying, the last time I think we were here mentioned that we were being designated a registry. There's an organization that's a registry for carbon credit farms in Africa. And we've been in conversations of doing the registry for Kenyan farms as well. But then when the discussion came, the guys just texted saying the act is in force. There's a new act. So that part is going to change, where you had a registry that is helping to track this. Of course, a bit of it is that. And he says there's also an executive interest in carbon regulations. And I think there will be some announcements at COP. The ministry is rushing to gazette the regulations, which I think will be enforced by December. So some things are happening here. Okay. But maybe public participation needs to be there. He goes further and says, let's think about the infrastructure of the registry and what needs sector. I think Kenyans who are specialists, and I was just saying that talk of UK, some of the leading climate action experts are actually Kenyan.
Correct.
And they're willing to participate, and a number of them will be talking about this subject next month during the homecoming convention. I would want to encourage other environmentalists who have been in this space, working with government. One, let's take advantage of our specialists. Secondly, let's do this transparently. Thirdly, let's involve the public so that there's justice.
Thank you.
There's also climate finance justice.
All right, let's close it up and we go now to transport sector, where the Transport Cabinet Secretary, Kipchumba Murkomen, has formed an expert committee to assess the state of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, Wilson and Moi airports. This comes hours after a video of leaking roof at JKIA emerged online, causing a national uproar. Murkomen said the team will deliver an interim report in 14 days and then submit its final report in another 2 weeks. Let's just listen in.
Status of our airports, and in particular Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, Wilson International Airport, and Moi International Airport, Mombasa. The terms of reference of the committee will be: 1, to assess the state of infrastructure facilities; 2, to assess the state of electromechanical facilities; 3, to review the works undertaken in the last 2 years by contractors; and 4, to identify immediate remedial measures to be undertaken. The decision of the committee will determine what action we are going to take in the interim within the next 14 days and comprehensively within the next 28 days. I did this because I didn't want any further knee-jerk reactions. I wanted something comprehensive. I have reports that there are certain concerns with the Moi International Airport in Mombasa, and also a very serious concerns at Wilson Airport. And therefore, I wanted to address this comprehensive.
All right. Wasn't me. This is what you were saying. We point our fingers at the previous regime for the elements that we have at JKIA. Interesting there. Do we really need this committee? And do we need this report?